I'm telling you, I gotta. Well, at least I've got a lot of audio to make sure that freaking the stream's running.
Oh,
Got you yawning and shit. Came through like a freaking a bell, as clear as a bell
okay.
on YouTube.
Cool.
I'm finally getting frustrated with D line, but I think if it continues to mess up, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of give up on that one. It's
How much interaction do you get on D Live? A bit,
not
that's right.
not not actually. I mean, interaction maybe on some of them, but like views aren't shit. We did that whole 6 hour stream yesterday,
Yeah.
and it didn't do shit at all. Like no
But I
views.
mean, on our own personal ones.
Yeah, that's even on that one. We got like 3 views from when we did the thing with Tan,
Okay.
and I mean nothing. We got 3 views there. 1 view on one that I did for Esoteric Agenda a week ago, and then I did. I got views on the red pill, and that was it. So I mean, it's not really worth having, to be honest.
And if it's only D Live, that's the one that only provides them. That's the only one with the time limit, it's not the month.
Uh, I don't even know. I mean, it did do the whole 6 hour stream. Wait, you're talking about within
Yeah.
the where it deletes it? Yeah,
Mm.
there's no permanent memory. After 7 days, it deletes it. So
Okay. Well, yeah.
I don't see a purpose really for it. I've said it before, and everybody's like, "Yeah, you need to keep it around, give it a try." And like, it's just not really worth the effort. I sat yesterday for 15 minutes trying to get that thing set up and working, and it just did not work. So
What does D Live claim as the use case for their
I don't
platform?
I don't know. To be honest with you, we've actually had this conversation before. I mean, I think Tan said something about it one time. It was a gaming platform, and
Uh,
he found it out somehow. But like this whole okay, there we go. Rumble's up and going. So we have Rumble up. We've got and it sounds good. We have YouTube up and it sounds good. Kick sounds good. It's up and going. And Twitch is another one that I'm going to probably not start using.
Fuck.
The hell was that?
D Live. I
Oh
was
my!
just trying to look at the terms of service, but they don't even provide any
Yeah,
reference to. Hang on. Hang on. Help and resources. About community legal.
see, so it looks like everything except for D Live is up and running. And
Uh,
yeah, I hate D Live too. It did that shit to me. It drives me nuts. Like I mean, they can at least mute the freaking songs and the audio for people when they come onto the platform. But the moment you get on there, all of a sudden,
Yeah,
some
it's that
people,
automatic playing, which I do not like. I am on Elements. Yeah, I hate any form of auto playing on Elements. Got toggled all these sort of autoplay, including the animated GIFs, off, turned off.
you know, all right. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. I guess we're good to go. It's at 5 minutes. So hello,
I'm
everybody.
ready.
Oh, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Roger's Real Time Talk Show event. I am Roger Hanson here with Mark Edworthy, and we are ready to get down and dirty when it comes to political history. That sounded geeky as hell, but it works. Um, you want to say hello, Mark Edworthy?
Hello, Mark Edward.
That is so cheesy. So okay, so I'm gonna drop all of this cool stuff that we have sitting up on the thing, and I'm gonna put you on the main screen so that we can have it the way it usually is. I know you hate the streamers, so I will get rid of those too if I can figure out where they're at. So last week we actually had a good episode go on. We were able to discuss Rousseau and Voltaire and how Voltaire's opinion of Rousseau was. We was also able to end this whole thing concerning the constitutional government, monarchism monarchism, and and liber- classic liberalism. Um, Now, after that, what I wanted to do is go further into the age of romanticism and what realism is, because believe it or not, this is something that most people don't even discuss anymore, or they when they do discuss it, they want to get all artsy fartsy about it. You know what I mean? The beautiful books or the beautiful paintings, and I think that honestly things have been engineered that way because people don't want this kind of conversation taking place when it comes to the political ramifications. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Mm, I would like to hear your argument on that one.
Okay. So when actually before we get on with that, tell me what your views on romanticism and realism is first. So that would
Like I said, I've just woken up, so my brain's a bit stagnant, stalled at the moment.
that means we caught you at a good time. We caught you off guard, unprepared.
Yeah, I haven't even had a coffee yet, so first coffee, sip of the coffee.
So I mean, just nothing elaborate. You don't have to get all descriptive and have notes and stuff like I know you're wanting to do, but just off the top of your head, what's your feelings when it comes to romanticism, first of all, and why?
Well, as a general concept or as a political will.
Well, just
Um,
that there was a movement. It was called the uh, rom, Age of Romanticism. Have you ever heard of it?
isn't that really related to sort of early 19th, oh, yeah, early 19th century?
Yes, it
So
is.
we're talking about Napoleon, we're talking about guillotine, we're talking about a very bloody sort of period of history.
Exactly. Now, you
Um,
you
very,
Now you hit something good on the nose, the bloody part. Okay,
Mm,
because we did talk about the French Revolution and the evils of what took place there. Now we're going to be talking about after that and what took place with Romanticism and with realism. Now, first of all, let me say something about Romanticism. There is a lot when it comes to literature and art and things of that nature, but like I said, I think that things were kind of engineered to where that's the way people wanted us to discuss that kind of stuff when we talked about romanticism, because there was a lot more that was going on in that movement versus the realist, and that isn't really discussed. So rather than going into long tangents about the headless horseman or Moby Dick or all of these cool books that were written because of the romanticists,
mm.
we can talk about it a little bit, but I want to stay more on the political history part of it. You know what I mean? So, but if it pops up, we can do it. And
Yeah, hence why I asked, are we just talking about politics, or are we talking about things like authors, writers, and art?
and trust me, yes, you are right. It is a part of it, but it's not the broader picture. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's the implications that came with that is important. So now that we've covered romanticism, what about your thoughts on realism and being a realist? What do you think about that?
Something that I think we've all, that's in, for lots of people, they've lost.
Oh,
Mm.
really? I didn't expect that. So what's in your mind? What's your interpretation of being a realist?
Being observant about your surroundings, being observant about the greater pictures.
Okay,
Um, yeah.
sounds good. Now with this, we're gonna kind of get into that. We're gonna start talking about what uh, the difference between romanticism is and what realism is. Now, there was a conflict between romanticism and realism during the late 18th and 19th centuries. And this wasn't merely like a matter of artistic or literature preferences, okay? It was a deeper struggle. These were two opposing worldviews, okay? Um, and what it was is this had to do with changing attitudes towards like nature, emotion, reason, and society. And the thing of it is it goes into like truth as well. What is truth? You know what I mean? Um, Now, like we were talking about with Napoleon and everything like that, a lot of this stuff emerged during freaking periods of like intense political and social upheavals in Europe. Um, that included revolutions. Besides the revolutions, you also have to look at the Industrial Revolution, which was basically the industrial. It was industrial capitalism, you know, and with that came the erosion of like traditional religious and uh, aristocratic authority. Like you had the monarchy, you had religious beliefs that were dying out during that time. You know what I mean? And because of that, these movements, which that's what Romanticism and the realists were. They were movements. They responded to these changes in different ways. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Okay. Now, do you know for sure what these changes were or what these different ways were?
When it comes to realism, we're talking about the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and therefore the creation of the Revolution, the move from and who are largely rural, sort of agricultural sort of situation to a more industrial in the city situation.
Right. And with Romanticism, it emerged like during the late 18th century, and that was because of it was basically a reaction to the Enlightenment. Okay, and also the rationalist ideas. And you got to understand that during this time period, the rationalist idea was what dominated, and it still dominates to this day. So that's where the romantic.
The slow erosion of religion, the slow death of God in at least the Western society.
Mhm, exactly.
Yeah.
And and the thing that a lot of people don't understand about the romantic thinkers is that they believe that the Enlightenment had basically flattened the soul. You know what I mean? The best way, or it also reduced like the complexity of human experience, and they also felt that it had turned the world into like this cold mechanical system, which was devoid of like wonder or spiritual depth, however you want to call it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And this is basically how they felt about it. They felt that's what um, the Enlightenment had done to them. You know what I mean? And that was where this reaction came from. It was from this feeling that that's what the Age of Enlightenment had done. You know, so that's where you start getting. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about the literature and everything, but I will kind of hint on it. But like, that's where Romanticism kind of gravitated towards themes like the supernatural. They love the medieval past. They like folklore. Um, and the big thing here, this is what we're going to get into. This is something that you like, and it's national identity. That's another thing they were big on. And I was looking at a good way of bringing this into more of the modern thought. You know what I mean? Get into things because we're covering Europe right now, and like I said, it's a huge topic with a lot of different things. You know what I mean? So this is basically the best route to take so that people get a general idea of what's taking place here. You know what I mean? Um, and I believe that this is really the best way of getting into it. Now, with Romanticism, you had the writers who wrote the Headless Horseman here in the United States. You had Moby Dick. You had Charles Dickinson, who was not a romanticist. He was actually a realist. But we'll get to that here in a minute. Uh,
I love the idea that you said the headless horseman of the United States. I live in the southwest of England. These sort of legends are all over the place down there.
yeah, you see,
Mm.
that's probably where we got it. To be honest with you, it probably migrated its way across the pond. You know, could have been. It really could have been.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is what the romanticists gravitated towards was these supernatural stories. They really loved the medieval past and folklore and things of that nature. Now, when it comes to the Enlightenment, it emphasized on logic, scientific reason, and universal laws. It championed the power of the human mind to discover truth and improve society. Um, so, Romanticism. Uh, what it did is it reasserted the importance of individual feeling, imagination, and intuition, and it also gave us a deep reverence for nature. You know what I mean? It celebrated mystery, sublime, and irrational, in the personal, individual experience. You know what I mean? So that's the two things that you had that going on there. You had the romanticists who believed in the individual personal experience, where had mystery, um, and things of that nature, and it involved nature. It was about the imagination and the intuition. And then you had the realists who didn't uh, believe in all that. They believed in straight logic, scientific reason, and universal laws. So, does that sound pretty legit for you?
That sounds like a good argument.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now realism, it emerged in the mid 19th century, um, and that was as a response to romanticism. Um, and they perceived romanticism um, as excesses and emotional indulgence, basically. Um, Realist thinkers and artists who were realists, they usually wanted to depict the world as it actually was, not as what it ought to be. You know what I mean? Um,
Mm.
they
Or at least one interpretation of,
right.
or a interpretation of, multiple interpretations of.
Well, they didn't believe in that. They believed that it as it, the way it is, as the way it actually is, not as what it.
Yeah, hence my comments earlier when you asked me the sort of observance of
Right.
environments. Yeah.
So they emphasized observation, detail, and like everyday experiences from like ordinary people. You know what I mean? They um, they weren't concerned with like beauty or transcendence or anything of that nature. They were only interested in truth, no matter how unpleasant or mundane it was. You know what I mean?
Utilitarian, which created utilitarianism, which created the more extreme sort of socialist concepts. Well, aided in the creation of the more extreme socialist concepts.
Well, see, I kind of had a misinterpretation of all of this when I first started because I was trying. In the beginning, I was trying to make the romanticists out to be the good guys and the realists to be these horrible people, which I've actually said to you, and I still believe realists are just horrible freaking people. Okay. But the more I started doing the research on this stuff, the more I realized that they're both a part of the problem. You know what I mean? Which is really interesting because that was real profound to me. Um, they both contributed to the way things ended up in a very negative way. You know what I mean? It's
Mm,
it's really interesting. Is all I got to say. But what's your take on that? Do you agree or disagree, or you just waiting? You're suspenseful and like, what do you got next, Roger?
well, it'd be well. Can sort of see your point, but yeah, I think you need to elaborate on your arguments a bit further.
I got your attention. Is what happened. I got your attention. Oh man, what are you talking about, man? So, like I said, the realists they emphasized on observation, detail, and everyday experiences. And I agree with you, by the way, with what you said. How eventually it developed into those things. Um,
Mm,
and they weren't. interested in beauty or transcendence. I can't ever say that thing. It was just the truth. Now, what realism rejected was idolized visions of romantic art. Instead, they'd focus on social conditions or political realities and psychological complexities that were supposed to be from real life. You know what I mean? So it got to the point where philosophically realism aligned with like empiricism. Um, and I don't know if you know what that is all about. I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with your concept. Yeah.
Because like during that time period, there was a growing belief in like social science and historical materialism. Um, Now, social science is one issue that I think a lot of people overlook. Like they don't understand. Like now we send our kids to school, and instead of learning history, they learn social science or social studies. You know what I mean? And there's a good chance that everything that has social on the end of it, like social science and social studies and social this, social that, that has to do with realism. Okay, and
Mhm.
that would have to do with what we're discussing right now. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now it was influenced by the rapid growth of cities, the spread of newspapers and photography, and the development of industrial capitalism. Now the conflict between romanticism and realism, um, it was more than just all that. It was more than just being aesthetic. You know what I mean? Um, these were like broader philosophical debates about how humans should understand the world as well as themselves. Romanticism held that the truth was internal, it was also subjective, emotional, and then you had realism, and realism believed that truth was external, observable, and objective. Okay, so what's your thoughts about this subjective thing?
I was just thinking of the to name a name. I was just thinking of the concept of the current UK Prime Minister. It is believed that the the UK Prime Minister, Starmer, has stated in the past that he does not have a favourite book. He does not dream. He's a he only bases his views on what he considers as being practical, legal realism.
Mm-hmm. So,
Um, he
yeah.
lacks any sort of imagination. He lacks any sort of, dare I say it, soul.
Oh wow, we're gonna we're gonna go that direction, are we? Let's just
Mm.
say he's objective, is what he is,
Well, um,
and and
it's a form of objectivism
well,
to say
the
that.
see the thing of it is about this. It really gets me, and a lot of people don't catch up on or catch it this, but they have actually done research on external thinking. External thinking is something that realists really don't catch on to. Like when you get caught up in external thinking, that's more of an animal instinct. Like when you look at an animal is that they think they're external thinkers. Okay, they worry about the what's going on with them. You know what I mean? Everyday things. When they're hungry, they need to find food. You know, when they freaking have to poop, they don't care where they go and poop. You know what I mean? And that's just the way that external thinkers are. Now, when you think internally, that's when you look at the spiritual side of things, or you look at the emotional side of things. You look at the morality of things. You know what I mean? So when I look at this stuff, man, that's the kind of thing that really sticks out to me. The whole difference between the internal and the external. You know what I mean?
Mm.
When it comes to those things. Um, Now, being subjective and objective and all that stuff, yeah, that's something I think people can do, but if you take it too far, that's a bad thing. What I find uh, most alarming about rationalists is the emotional part. Like they don't get into the idea of the emotions of things. They don't look at beauty. They don't think art is important. They don't think that a beautiful poem is important. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I took from it. But that was something that really stuck out to me. Even though we're not going to get into all that stuff, I did want to point that out. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair
Okay, I just wanted.
uh, connotation.
Mhm. But that those are the things that um, really stuck out to me whenever I came across this stuff. Like, and the romantics. Okay, um, for them, the world was like a place of spiritual significance, and that was uh, for everything. And that was for like every tree or the sunset. You know what I mean? It all held a meaning. Um, Now, after bringing all that up, you come to a couple of realists that I wanted to mention. I want to see if you knew anything about these people. Have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Victor Hugo?
Yes.
Did you?
Again, I can't think at this present moment. um, like I said, I just sort of woken up just within the last hour and a half, so my brain's a bit. Nah. Yeah, I can't think at the present moment, but yeah, I'm aware of the name.
Okay, so Hugo was a realist, and he believed that the world was governed by social forces, economics, and historical change. That was what his big philosophy was when it came to being a realist, and that's what most of these realists during that time period believed in. Like they believed in the social uh, aspects of things, social economy, and they also believed in historical changes. You know what I mean? They didn't focus on folklore or anything of that nature. You know what I mean? It was all about being realistic about it and looking at like the historical changes that took place and things like that. So after that, I also wanted to mention another guy. Uh, I have a hard time with his last name, so if I get it messed up, I'm sorry, but it's Ivan Turgenev. Have you ever heard of him?
Uh, Not off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
Hold up, you're breaking up. What'd you say? Your audio's
Yeah, not off the top of my head.
okay. So
Oh, um, yeah, not.
maybe you'll recognize him if I mention this. He wrote a novel. It's called Fathers and Sons. Have you ever heard of a book called Fathers and Sons?
Again, you're just firing names at me at this present moment.
Now, Turgenov was a Russian, just so you know. I know how you are about those Ruskies. But the story Fathers and Sons depicted like a generation divide between older Russians who like clung to tradition, and then younger intellectuals who like embraced nihilism and rejected all inherited beliefs. So basically, they became atheists or nihilists who just doesn't believe in nothing. Um, does any of that sound familiar to you?
Uh, oh, don't. Oh well, believe in the here and now rather than nothing.
Right. Now,
Yeah,
now when Turgenev, he was in particular Turgenev, he was criticized by pan-Slavic thinkers because of his Western learnings or leanings, and he also refused to like embrace the mystical dimensions of the Slavic culture. He rejected it. You know what I mean? He rejected all of that, and that's where he ended up getting a lot of crap from because he rejected it all, and he was a realist and stuff like that. So, um, pan Slavic thinkers is something that we'll eventually be getting into. I don't know if you know much about pan Slavic ideologies.
yeah. Um, Again, carry on.
Okay. Well, just to let you know, that's really where we start getting into the 20th century when we start talking about pan-Slavic thinkers and how that evolved during time. Now, like I said, Turgenev was critical of pan-Slavic thinkers, but then we come to another guy, and I know you're going to know about this guy. Have you ever heard of Leo Tolstoy?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so tell me what you think of Leo Tolstoy.
Somebody that aided in the Russian Revolution. That once the Bolsheviks came to power, he was sort of for the first what 20 yeah no first 10, 15 years it was um um a sort of controlling force in the Soviets, and then there was a big split, a philosophical split between him and Stalin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. So the I'm glad that you mentioned that because this kind of goes into what happened there. Okay. Now Tolstoy, just so people know, he was deeply spiritual. Okay. That's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Tolstoy was deeply spiritual, but he became critical of like institutional religion. And
sorry. I was thinking Trotsky rather than Tolstoy. Yeah,
okay,
I was thinking of a different person altogether.
okay.
Yeah,
So
but
do you know anything about Tolstoy?
uh, yes, I do. But again,
Well, let's go over that because we don't
uh,
need to hear that stuff about Trotsky. I can't believe you did that.
yeah. Again, like I said,
It's
I
causing
just
your head
my
to
brain's a bit
explode. If we
my
keep this
brain's a bit flat at the moment.
if we keep this up and you're holding your head like that, my dream will come true. Your head will explode. I've been trying for like what, 5 months now to get your head to explode, and it just has not worked.
You are naming all these people.
I cannot believe Tolstoy is what eventually brought you to the closest. Uh,
No, you name all these people, and they all have significant meaning for me. But again,
you haven't read about
uh,
him in a long time.
yeah, but
Now,
again, you're just throwing names at me at the moment.
I enjoy it so much. This is actually cool. Now, Tolstoy, let me say that again. He was deeply spiritual, but he was critical of institutional religions, and he often portrayed like priests and aristocrats as like morally bankrupt. So there was a lot of that going on during that time period where people were split. You know what I mean? Even though he is portrayed as being a realist, he actually was pretty spiritual in that aspect. It's just he felt that the church itself was was corrupt, and that um, and that's something that I even try to talk about whenever I'm talking to people who are really religious, and they have a hard time understanding that there's a difference between the church and spirituality. You know what I mean? And I do know that that is still an issue that keeps going on because there's a lot of people who are religious who really believe that their church has something to do with their spiritual beliefs. And without the church, freaking, that there is no God. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of split on that whole way of thinking there, you know. Um,
Mm, I would argue that people's views are influenced by by external forces. In the case of religion, the church or the place of worship is the major influence for a lot of people.
mm, well, there's a lot of people who need church. You know what I mean? I believe in that. Like there's a lot of people out there who I would hate to see this world if about 70% of the people who go to church didn't have a church to go to, because I honestly think this world would go to shit. You know what I mean? Like when you sit and you listen to what a lot of these people are saying, and you you realize, man, that these people go to church. Um, there's a good reason for why they need to go to church. You know what I mean? Because even though they're saying that they believe in God, they're saying a lot of hateful things, and they need to go into church and have that preacher preaching to them, telling them, "Look, this is bad. You can't be doing this." You know what I mean?
There's an argument in the US, especially in what the Midwest, church and religious orthodoxy is a major thing. But in Britain, and I'm thinking of an argument that people like Jeff Taylor make all the time. That Britain is a sort of cultural Christian um, society, based society, and over the last, I don't know, 100 years or last 50 odd years, we've seen the church or religion, church going to has been reduced significantly,
It's gone,
and
it's gone to pot based.
God, yeah, which raises the idea, um, which creates a sort of concept of people just being more utilitaristic.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, Dostoevsky. Okay. Now, the thing about him is that Fyodor Dostoevsky. Have you ever heard of him?
Again, you are just firing names at the moment.
Okay, so
I probably have, but can't
Dostoevsky.
think.
He was more complex. Okay, now while he did explore the dangers of like modern belief, he also showed how people who clung blindly to old values could become self-righteous or hypocritical. You know what I mean? Um, he was more sympathetic to Orthodox and Russian Messianism, I guess you could call it. But he also became a part of the debate. You know what I mean? Because he did embrace certain mystical and national ideas, um, but he still, he still portrayed the Russian soul as deeply fractured and tormented. You know what I mean? So, like, this comes back to a lot of his novels. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, I didn't want to get into too much of this, but what I can say is, like, his novel, or all of his novels, basically, it dealt with, like, inner conflict, you know what I mean, and moral ambiguity. Does that
Mm,
make, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And then he also brought up like the dangers of blind ideological beliefs. You know what I mean? And he didn't discriminate between the Western ideology or the pan-Slavic. You know what I mean? It was all the same. He didn't want people to. Um, well, he wanted to make sure people understood what the dangers of these being blind to like ideological beliefs were. So um, now he kind of straddled the line between realists and like spiritual. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And the weird thing about it, though, he was revered as a nationalist. You know what I mean? So, but even though he was a nationalist, he also challenged uh, like their more simplistic narratives and stuff, which the more simplistic narratives would have been more of what the Pan Slavics believed in. So now, after him, we um, we have to go back a little bit to John Jacques Rousseau. Um, now, Romanticism was influenced by John Jacques Rousseau, and the reason why they wanted to, or they were influenced, because like I said, Rousseau wrote a lot of beautiful stuff, even though I don't really agree with who he was as a person. You know what I mean? And they held like a hopeful view of humanity's like innate goodness and our capacity for like moral transformation, stuff like that, all that goody goody religious stuff that makes me want to puke. You know what I mean? So that was what a lot of romanticism or romanticists uh, was inspired by Rousseau over. You know what I mean? Um, but I would honestly say that they really had no clue, like in real life, what he was really about. You know what I mean? Um, but uh, I think the one thing that they were inspired by was like the revolutionary ideologies, and also Rousseau also introduced like the nationalist movements. And if you really get into what Rousseau was about, he emphasized cultural identity and then emotional unity and stuff of that nature. So that would most likely be the reason why they really were inspired by Rousseau. Um, and plus, you also got to think too. Like back then, he also influenced religion as well as spirituality. You know, and there's a little bit of mysticism
Hmm.
going on there. And Rousseau, if you ever find out, or if you ever get to where you read about him, you'll understand that he was full of piety. You know, so well, you probably already have. Have you read much after we talked about him?
Well, not recently.
What have you read about him? Has that coffee kicked in yet? Are you able to talk? Calm down. You caused your microphone to mess up. Okay.
Yeah, I think I need another cup.
Yeah.
Again, I've not read anything recently
So
within
what
years.
what have you read in the past that you can remember?
You ask me,
Okay, from my point of view,
uh, yeah,
what I think they really drew most off of from Rousseau was things like faith, spiritual longing, um, the divine found in nature, stuff of that nature. Because you'll hear a lot uh, of that going on. You know what I mean? Um, so, like romanticism, that's really big on what they influenced. You know what I mean? That's how they did it basically. Romanticism. When you look at romanticism and what they influence religion and spirituality with, it's usually about faith, spiritual longing, and how the divine is found in nature. Um, Now, realism, on the other hand, they influence like the rise of pragmatic and pessimistic political theories, things of that nature. You know what I mean? Um, they, uh, they viewed history as shaped, not not by ideas uh, or by power, or you know what I mean. Well, actually, no, it was the opposite. They actually freaking believed the opposite. They believe,
yeah.
yeah, they believed that it was shaped by ideas, or not by ideas, but by power. You know what I mean? Um, Also through class struggles and institutional structures. So, right there, that's kind of where I blend in there too, because I do believe that like the institutional structures, like the educational system, is what actually is a big part um, of what shaped history was through the educational system. Class struggle. I see class struggle as happening all along all along human civilization. As long as we've been able to have what we would call a civilization, there's always been class struggle. So I don't even I don't even listen to that shit. You know what I mean? So, but like I can say though, like the educational system is something that does definitely influence um,
Hmm.
history. You know, I hear everybody always saying it's always the victors that make history, but I would go even further to say that that's not really the case. It's the intellectuals who freaking create the narrative.
It's those people that can shout loudest.
Mm-hmm. Well, the
Uh,
narrative.
this goes back to the so-called long march with institutions I keep on referring to, where you've got a certain subset of belief viewpoint being pushed by academics of a certain have a certain philosophy, and which then is taught to students, maybe be schools, kids, or people of higher education, and then that narrative, those specific narratives, are moved into the further world.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, and then you also got to take into this whole thing when it comes to realism and being a realist. Just so people know, when you're calling yourself a realist, um, you got to understand what realism is aligned with. They believe more in secularism, secularism,
Again, yeah, like I said, utilitarianism.
and,
But
and
yeah,
and like they portrayed religious institutions real critically, and they emphasize moral complexity over spiritual purity. Spiritual purity is something that I haven't really freaking heard much of anymore. You know what I mean? It's like people don't even want to talk about that. The only time you hear people talk about that is when they talk about Catholic schools. You know what I mean? When the nun smacks your hand with the ruler.
depends on the religion.
You know. Well, I
It
mean,
depends on the religion.
when was the last time you've ever heard anybody talk about spiritual purity?
Um, in relation to the, I'm going to be very careful what I say here. In relation to a specific religion, let's say.
Okay.
I'm going to be very careful what I say there, because again, I could get into, at least theoretically, I could get into a lot of trouble in the
Okay.
UK. Mm.
We will make sure that you are not in trouble there in the UK. Okay.
Mm.
Now, another thing though, when it comes to that though, is you got to realize it mirrored the growing interest in psychology and the inner workings of the human mind as something that was shaped by the environment and each person's experiment or experience. You know what I mean? That's what they were real big on. And they were big on pointing that out rather than saying that it was shaped by divine inspiration or inner feeling. You know what I mean? So you have that nurture versus nature kind of
Mm.
shit going on, in my opinion. At least that's what I'm taking from it. This would be the point in history where we started having to put up with the bullshit of nature versus nurture crap.
In essence, yeah, you're correct. Yeah, in essence.
You know, and then last week I had the conversation with you about John Jacques Rousseau writing about how you should rear your children, and in Voltaire, with his criticisms on that, which I don't know if that's true or not, if Rousseau actually abandoned his children to the orphanage. That sounds like something Voltaire would say to anybody he despised,
I did
but I would.
do a bit of research on this, just very small amount of research, and I believe that it was actually Kurt.
So it did occur.
I believe so. So from what I've seen,
And
from my
I mean,
understanding,
to be honest, dude, I've invested so many times at not, or so much time on not liking this guy, even if Voltaire did lie, I would probably just go ahead and continue the narrative that he was a bastard who abandoned his children to orphanages. Orphanages, you know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Because I know Voltaire was a big mouth, and I say that all the time. But he also, look at what he promoted. Freedom of speech. You know,
mm,
so of course somebody who, you know, believed in freedom of speech would have a big mouth and say a lot of wordy stuff. You know, so I can understand that. You know, and there, don't get me wrong, there is a good chance that Voltaire did just make it up out of anger for the stuff that Rousseau was saying, but I doubt it. To be honest with you, I would almost bet Rousseau was that kind of a guy, talk all this elaborate, beautiful stuff, and then abandon his children to an orphanage because he didn't want to take care of them. You know what I mean? Um, and that was a part of his narrative that eventually grew into this stuff right here, where it became a part of nature versus nurture.
mm,
Um, I and I personally think that Rousseau was probably the inspiration for the realist movement. To be honest with you, because of a lot of the crap that has been pushed out. Because that's what realists believe in. You know that, right?
mm.
If you're calling yourself a realist, then you should be believing in this stuff. Do you believe that?
You, well, my personal beliefs are a bit more complicated than that, but yeah, I get what you mean.
You know. Now, this tension between the romanticists and the realists, um, it would be expressed most clearly in the contrast between utopian socialists inspired by romantic ideas and materialist thinkers like Karl Marx, who sought a scientific understanding of society. Right now, by the end of the 19th century, the line between romanticism and realism, it began to blur. Some thinkers and artists combined the emotional intensity of romanticism with the observational rigor of realism, and that created new forms of expression. So that is something that I've actually been finding out, which does make sense. So in reality, what happened was, and if you can check on the history too, like the age of romanticism died off, but it didn't disappear. You know what I'm saying? What happened was these realists, they were they were fascinated with the way these romanticists thought. They didn't agree with like the ideological stuff that was being portrayed about heroes and stuff of that nature. But they wanted to understand their way of thinking, so they started blending it into their thought process. You know what I'm saying? Where they were actually incorporating some of this stuff just on an analytical kind of level. You know what I mean? And a good example would be the Brothers Grimm. The
Mm,
brother, a lot of people don't know the history of the Brothers Grimm themselves because they hear the stories, but they don't understand that the Brothers Grimm were actually the ones who um, started linguistics, like the whole thing about linguistics and the way or and where words or originate. You know what I mean?
mm.
That was from them. So I found that pretty interesting. So
Or they didn't create the concept of etymology.
well, I mean, it's an interesting story how all of that played out. You know what I mean? Because like you can clearly tell that the Brothers Grimm were romanticists. Because I mean
Mm.
Hansel and Gretel. You know what I mean? But Hansel and Gretel was also a realist concept where because during that time, German families were starving to death, so the mother and the fathers were known to take their children out in the woods and abandon them. You see,
But they are only basing their stories upon it's just another iteration of previous stories. A lot of this goes back to sort of medieval sort of arguments, and they've just put in a much more, I wouldn't say modern spin, but a much more modern understanding
right?
on yeah.
A realist point of view, because they wanted to point out the downtrodden and the starving people of Germany and how they had to abandon their children in the forest.
Mm.
You see, I mean that's a realist approach to folklore during that time period. You know what I mean? And that's what realists wanted to focus on. So we have actually came to our first hour, and I think it's time for us to take a quick break so that you can get some more coffee. And I'm going to go use the bathroom, take a quick break, and get me some coffee too. And we'll come back here because after we're done with this break, I want to get into a very, very interesting conversation. I think you'll like it too. This is about Nietzsche. So let's find
The
out.
bloke with
Huh?
the amazing stars.
So let's find
The
out.
bloke with the amazing stars.
Yeah. We both know Nietzsche, and we
Yeah.
got to find out what Nietzsche thought about this crazy shit. You know what I mean? What was Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy when it came? Because I also found out some dirt about Nietzsche and his thoughts on Rousseau. Just so you know, don't want to give away the goodies until we get back, but um, we're going to find out what Nietzsche's thoughts about John Jacques Rousseau were. All right.
Okay. Okay.
So let me mute out. You go ahead and mute out so that you don't have to listen to this shit. And we will put Mr. Robots, aka Illuminati, on Rumble Radio's music on. You can find him at Hacker Radio and listen to this if you like it. Go and check him out. Give him likes, subscribes, whatever. Tell him how cool he is. And we'll be right back.
Awakening from an epic dream, awakening from the long dark night. Awakening from history, awakening from duality. The liberation of the human soul to consciousness of the one and all. The activation of the sacred plan, the birthing of a new man, a new man. When the light within is revealed, all the pain and suffering shall be healed, and the truth of love is our destiny, living on the earth in peace and harmony. Awakening to new perceptions, awakening to the joy of life. Awakening to a new dimension, awakening to a paradise. The illusion of separation disappearing to unity. high vibration into the wonder of the mystery. A mystery. When the light within is revealed, all the pain and suffering shall be healed, and the truth of love is our destiny, living on the earth in peace and harmony. Theophilus Thistler, the thistle sifter, is sifting a sieve full of unsifted thistles. Thrust 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. Theophilus Thistler, the thistle sifter, is sifting a sieve full of unsifted thistles. Thrust 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles. Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, and if Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Mr. Robot rolled round. Mr. Robot rolled round. And if Mr. Robot rolled or rolled round, and if Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Here is an exercise demonstrating the union of in at the end of words, dividing and gliding and sliding and falling and brawling and sprawling and driving and driving and striving, dividing and gliding and sliding and falling and brawling and sprawling and driving and driving and driving. Theophilus Thistler, the thistle sifter, is sifting a sieve full of unsifted thistles. Plus 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. Theophilus Thistler, the thistle sifter, is sifting a sieve full of unsifted thistles. Plus 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. 3,000 thistles. Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, and if Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Mr. Robot Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, and if Mr. Robot rolled around or rolled round, where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Where is the round roll? Mr. Robot rolled round. Hardly had his Hail Highness heard the easy hedgehog when he hit the humming bee by the hunter who had horrible beetles in the human hall. I love to hear the horse's hard iron hooves go hammer, 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 hammer on the easy highway. I hit my horse hard. I'm hurrying around to hunt up hogs. Theophilus Thistler. Theophilus Thistler. Theophilus Thistler. Theophilus Thistler. Theophilus Thistler. Theophilus Thistler.
Once the gods carved earth like a cosmic chessboard, Poseidon claimed Atlantis, his star-born accord. 10 twin suns, throne of tridents waves at his command. Empire stretched from Baobic stones to Mayan sand. Monoliths stacked like Legos blocks no crane could lift. Sonic levitation, gods don't need pulleys or grit. Athena taught Athens, Hephaestus forged veins of gold, but Atlantis spires pierced heaven, stories untold. Ages of virtue, divine blood pure in the veins. No egregious geodesic temples where starlight reigns, but mortality crept in, diluted the grace. Gold turned to rust, hubris eclipsed the god fast.
Souls of Atlantis, drowned in the deep. Poseidon's lost kingdom, where titans still sleep. From Giza to Tiwanaku, the codes ancient law. As above, so below, cosmic empire of law. And princes of plasma, their thrones now debris. Echoes of Atlantis, where gods walked the sea.
Zeus watched the fall, saw vice crack the divine. Pyramids hummed warnings, but they ignored the signs. Sky split with fury, tsunami swallowed their pride. Atlantis sang screaming, but blueprints survive. Baalbek's foundation, stones that defy modern math. 1,000-ton puzzle, gravity's aftermath. Scholars still baffled how they align the stars. They rode cosmic currents, breaching space-time's bars. Now divers chase shadows where crystal cities gleamed. AI scans the ocean, but truth a half-dream. Dream Freemasons whisper maps in their lodges of lore. Plato's Critias, a metaphor or a war.
Echoes of Atlantis, drowned in the deep. Poseidon's lost kingdom, where titans still sleep. From Giza to Tiwanaku, the codes ancient law. As above, so below, cosmic empire of law. 10 princes of plasma, their thrones now debris. Echoes of Atlantis, where gods walk the sea.
They say Poseidon's seed still flows in our veins. In every megalith, every grid that restrains. The Dogon chart Sirius, Templars guard the flame. But Atlantis tech, it's encoded in our DNA's frame. Zeus's verdict was fire, a flood in ice. Yet the Sphinx still stares, whispering sacrifice. Mortal minds crave power, but miss the design. True kings rule through resonance, not bloodline. Now decode the ruins, their psalms etched in stone. A star-born king's empire, now dust and bone. The hall of records buried neath Giza's cold gaze holds anti-gravity schematics from pre-flood days. Crystal engines hummed, Orgon fueled their might, till pride turned their frequencies dissonant blight. The Anunnaki fled, Mars colonies crumbled. Leviathan's bones in the Mariana rumbled. But Poseidon's ghost rides the Bermuda's mist. Evolve past the greed or drown in the abyss. Tsunamis taller than gods crack continents like eggs. Jungles of Egypt drowned, turned to sand in Poseidon's regret. Mammoths shrunk to lapdogs, skies choked by volcanic breath. Waves circled the globe thrice, 3 funerals for death. Up Nepiston, rode the arc of frequencies, not wood. Up tetrahedron ziggurat where anti-grav pulses stood. While Atlantis sank, he spliced DNA and quantum seeds. Stashed them in Göbekley's veins and Indus Valley reeds. Volcanic winter's curse, Zeus hit the reset. Scorched the grids, erased the moon-ringed internet. Noah's not a shepherd, he's a star-born archivist. Cracking hermetic scrolls in caves where mushrooms twist. The survivors crawl from mud with amnesiac eyes. Built new gods from scrap metal and fallen skies. Now desert bones whisper where cedars once soared. Man's just a ghost in Atlantis' holographic horde. The flood wasn't water, it was math. A codex purge, Enoch's nightmares digitized in the cosmic surge. As above, so below, the blueprint stays true. Rise from the ashes or drown in what's new. The flood wasn't water, it was math. A codex purge, Enoch's nightmares digitized in the cosmic surge. As above, so below, the blueprint stays true. Rise from the ashes or drown in what's you. Echoes of Atlantis drowned in the deep, the deep. Poseidon's lost kingdom, where titans still sleep. From Giza to Tiwanaku, their codes etched in awe. As above, so below, cosmic empire of law. 10 princes of plasma, their thrones now debris. Echoes of Atlantis, where gods walk the sea. So when you see Stonehenge, Angkor Wat spire, know Atlantis 20 years, a block every 2 minutes. Hieroglyphs scream their pride, but not a how and what's written. Modern science scratches heads, these structures can't be mimicked. Copper tools, now scholars tripping, logic thinly stretched and twisted. Ran an obelisk, 1,000 tons dragged across the sand. Today's cranes can't lift a fifth, what force moved them by hand? Call the ancients primitive, yo, that's pure delusion. Physicists today need miracles to crack their fusion. The high priest of Kemet mapped the stars with precision, while modern minds stay chained to 3D prison. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden with an allegorical crypt. Written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living secrets that rewrite history's episode. As above, so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode. Conscious matrix, how came a pyramid ode? The Sphinx wears water scars, a flood from ancient skies. Explosives crack the pyramids, no tombs, just hollow lies. Money stolen? Nah, that's ego talk, a weak hypothesis. Truths buried in the stars, encrypted in the myths. Sacred geometry, pagan songs, the roots of Christendom. Pythagoras knelt at their feet, Jesus learned the kingdom. Temples mirror Orion, Aztecs trace the same glow. Megalithic GPS, what's buried below. They split the lotus stem, hid wisdom at the core. Solomon's temple, just a copy of what came before. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden wisdom, allegorical crypts. Written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living secrets that rewrite history's episode. As above, so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode. Conscious matrix, alchemy pyramid ode. Iron to gold, alchemy's flame, they mastered the unseen. Telekinetic levitation, Mars dust in their genes. Critics laugh, aliens but the proof's in the plasma. Why is the Dogon tribe no serious? Was a binary drama. Myths of metaphors, the truth's too bright to hold. Scattered in ruins worldwide, a map etched in gold. They call themselves Negeru, gods with cosmic ships. Gifted fire, math and law, then dip beyond the eclipse. Now academia's gatekeepers mock what they can't measure. But the scales of Ma'at weigh soul, not tech or treasure. The Zet Tepe dawned when gods walked as king. Left blueprints in Gobekli Tepe and the Nazca line. The Emerald Tablet's truth burns through the scholar's denial. We're echoes of starlight reclaiming our trial.
When you stare at the sky, feel the ache in your chest. That's ancestral memory, we're all cosmic guests. The pyramids home a hymn, rising cold but divine. As above, so below, till the world's realigned.
Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, the truth's a spiral eternity script. In a language of symbolism, we're gods we've been missing.
Okay, we are back. That was probably not the best selection of music for this genre of, or this topic, I should say. What do you think, Mark?
Maybe.
I was sitting there listening to it and thinking, we're talking about political history and stuff, and I'm talking about Gobekli Tepe and the Nazca lines and secret encoded messages and the. Okay, so if you guys enjoyed that, go over and check out Illuminati on Rumble. His channel is Hacker Radio. Give him a like, subscribe, share, make some comments for him, tell him how much you like it, and stuff like that. So, you ready?
Or otherwise.
Yes, or otherwise.
So, I could or otherwise.
So, are you ready to get into the next part of the conversation, Mark?
Carry on.
Okay, so what do you know about Friedrich Nietzsche before we get started?
A lot.
What do you know?
You didn't do this. Just fly off an name and then what do we know? In what sort of aspect? Because there's quite a large amount of history. There's quite a large amount of things.
What was his ideological beliefs, in your opinion? You can conjecture all you want. This is my channel, my stream, so you don't have to worry about that. Just conjecture away. You don't need notes. Just tell me what your thoughts are and what he believed in and things of that nature.
You're asking me for a very large subject, really, aren't you? Okay, somebody that was born during
Your
was
mic's,
brought up during the creation of modern.
your mic's kind of screwing up.
I can't do anything about
Okay.
that. But carry on, yeah. Anyway, well,
You want me to go ahead and
yeah,
just
well then,
okay? So
history, carry on. Continue.
now the weird thing that I found out about Friedrich Nietzsche when it comes to the Romantics, okay, is like he absorbed some of the romantic passions and the aesthetics that go with it, but he also fiercely criticized like the sentiment and stuff like that. He promoted like a hard, lucid, confrontational kind of reality of existence. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's really weird how that worked out with him. Now, your mic seems to be really
Yeah.
your mic seems to really be screwing up bad, dude. Like you'll start talking and it'll just start freaking out. Okay, try it again. Okay,
Again, I can't do anything about that.
you sound good so far. You said something about contradictory.
Yeah, he's a bit of a person of sort of. Yeah, he's got a bit of a contradictory sort of.
Huh?
Um,
So
um,
now, for me,
my mind was.
well, for me personally, you know, his views were really ambivalent, basically, and they were contradictory at times. You know what I'm saying? This is something that was really weird when it came to John Jacques Rousseau because he did comment on him, and it was weird because I've never heard Nietzsche ever freaking say that he admired um, somebody and then criticize him like he did Rousseau. You know what I mean? But he did both. He admired and criticized Rousseau. He saw him like as a pivotal figure when it came to the development of modern European thought. You know, and that right there kind of shows me how Rousseau even seduced Nietzsche. You know what I mean? And that's basically what it was because if you really read into what Rousseau was about, he jumped on board the whole idea behind classic liberalism, but then he started taking a turn when it came to stuff like child rearing and then private property. You know, he didn't feel.
I was just going to say you can admire somebody and still criticize them. The two things are not mutually exclusive.
Well, I think it is when it comes to Rousseau. I think I think you either have to admire him or you have to hate his guts.
Um,
There's no.
Criticism and hating somebody's guts are two different, not necessarily the same thing.
Well, I mean, that's. I don't know.
I
That
mean,
could
there
be.
could be a lot of people I admire, but I'm still critical of them.
That's pretty European of you.
So if you admire somebody, you worship the ground that they walk on.
Well, in today's world, yes, that's exactly.
Very sort of black and white, very sort of.
Yes, that's a more realist
Mm,
kind of point of view, I guess you'd say. So yeah, I mean, in modern times in today's world, yes, that's exactly what you should do. Like
so,
if you admire
so,
somebody, you should worship them.
so if you, so if you admire somebody, you've got no criticism of them at all. Everything they do is wonderful.
Well, you have to go back to the last episode we were talking about when we were talking about the revolution in France. Okay,
Mhm.
there's no tolerate. You cannot tolerate dissent. Okay,
Okay.
you see. So with that in mind, and Rousseau, you have to understand that, like, yes, there can be no dissent. You know what I mean? And that could be another reason why Nietzsche actually admired Rousseau too. But I haven't found him actually making a comment on anything about dissent. I seen that on what's his name, the dude, I forgot his name again, Robin something, the guy that was
Oh, okay.
the
Joe
guy.
Rogan talking about Nietzsche.
No, what's his name? The guy that was involved in the French Revolution. We were talking about him yesterday.
Oh,
Robespierre or some
uh,
Robespierre.
yeah.
Robespierre. Now he was the one who really. I would almost bet that Nietzsche actually admired him because of the way he spoke of revolution and the way Nietzsche was, you know what I mean? Because he was really, uh, he was pretty hardcore when it came to a lot of his beliefs. Um, and Robespierre was known to quote John
Oh,
Jacques Rousseau too. I don't even know how to properly say his name.
Rose, yeah, but yeah, we know what you mean.
Like John, however you say Russo's first name. It's supposed to have like two N's and an E, so I don't even know how to properly pronounce that. Jonet or Jane Jacques Rousseau. So, and
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's John. Yeah, yeah,
John.
yeah.
Now, like I was saying, Nietzsche both admired and criticized Rousseau. He saw him as a pivotal figure in the development of modern European thought. Um, Now, this was especially so when it came to concerns about morality, individuality, and the origins of society. You know, um, uh, now where their philosophies did diverge, they diverged in key ways. But even though they did diverge, Nietzsche did acknowledge Rousseau's profound influence on European intellectuals and their intellectual life. You know what I mean? Um, he viewed Rousseau as a powerful force behind the rise of egal. Well, how do you say that word? Egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is what it was, I believe. You mentioned it earlier, and and like also he was real big on like the idolization of the common man. You know what I mean? And you'll see um, a lot of that when it comes to that period where it was about the common man. You know, and that was pretty much the rise of socialism, where they wanted to focus on the common man rather than you know what we've been discussing about like freaking pan-Slavic beliefs in like supernatural or romanticism, even like supernatural deities, gods, and church and religion and stuff like that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Again, the utilitarianistic viewpoint.
Yeah. You seem to have problems with it too, but you said it a lot better than I did, man. It just
Utilitarianism, as in, yeah.
yeah, for me it's just a really really hard word to freaking say. You know what I mean? It's like, um, and
Utilitarianism. You want?
now, like I said, he did picture him as a powerful force, but he often connected Rousseau with like cultural and philosophical movements um, that exalted sentiment and democratic morality over aristocratic or heroic values. That's something else that aristocratic and heroic values is something that we're going to be getting into. Like that's something that whenever you get into like having a monarchy, that's kind of like what believing in the monarchy is about, is that aristocratic kind of value. You know what I mean? They also believed that the king was had divine privilege because he was a direct connection to God. And that kind of goes all the way back to the beginning. Even during ancient history, they believed that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That
Goes back to the point I made last week about the monarch being the sort of spokesperson for the God's representative on earth.
Mhm.
And much like the Catholic sort of belief where the Pope is the representative of God in the Catholic
Yeah,
Church.
exactly. Exactly. Like a kingship kind of, or a hierarchical kind of setup, where you have to go through this or this or this different stages or some shit. You know what I mean? Aristocratic. When it comes to that, they're talking about kings, and like the Catholic Church, it would be the Pope, things of that nature.
Even though that King Charles III has stated that he's the defender of all faiths, which is a bit bizarre, but in my opinion, but from a historical point of view, he's the defender of the Church of England, and therefore the Church of England represents of the Anglican Church concept of God's representative on earth.
I would actually believe that too, especially with the first season where we were talking about Ireland and those foster kids. Do you? I mean, did you realize like every one of those, I guess, institutions had the queen as um, well, their freaking patron. deity, kind of like, you know what I mean? The patron saint queen so and so, you know what I mean? I don't know if you remember that or not, but
Saint. I wouldn't call the monarch a saint. Don't think any monarch
well, I mean, it
haven't
was.
done any research, and that's why I don't think there hasn't been any sort of. In fact, is saints are not in the Anglican Church.
Well, I mean that.
Yeah, saints are Catholic.
Well, we'd have to check that out. It's in the first episode, or in the first season when we did it, and I can check it out later because I mean I do remember that we were talking about the foster care system during the last part of the series, and about that one guy who lost his kids because he didn't have his wife with him, and they got sent to the foster care system. And then I went and I checked it out, and it actually went even deeper. Like they started coming up with this crazy stuff about Satan worshiping happening within the freaking foster services and shit. Do you remember that?
Just barely.
Yeah, it was really weird. I thought it was at least, but yeah, I'll check that out because that was one thing that really stuck out to me when it comes to that. Now the weird thing about Nietzsche too is Nietzsche also believed that Rousseau helped foster a worldview that made weakness appear virtuous and humility seem more noble than strength. You know what I mean? Now this for Nietzsche was a dangerous reversal of natural order, and natural order uh, was something he was real big into. You know what I mean? The natural order, and he felt that it was one that contributed to what he called the slave morality that dominated modern Europe. He believed that it was a slave morality, and for me, when I first heard that, it kind of rung out to me the word Malcolm X. You know what I mean? Because believe it or not, I actually did do research on Malcolm X, and I gotta tell you something. Malcolm X actually, you can tell that he studied Nietzsche because of this terminology. You know what I mean? The slave mentality or morality. He Malcolm X called it mentality, but Nietzsche called it the morality, the slave
Yeah.
morality. And I really did enjoy actually a lot of the stuff Malcolm X talked about because he did his research. You know what I'm saying? And I think this is kind of where he got the ideas from. I'm almost certain this is where he actually pulled his information on. It's also strange how people viewed him when it came to the civil rights movements and stuff like that. You know what I mean? How he was pretty much shunned because of what he had to say. And that's the same way that happened, or the same thing that happened with Nietzsche too. You know, people didn't accept him. He was probably one of Europe's most hated men, to be honest with you, during that time period. You know, do you agree with me?
I'm not sure. Like I said, Germany was going through a weird, or was going through a transformative sort of situation at the time. Again, we're talking about the creation of modern Germany. We're talking about the Bismarck sort of changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me also point out too, though, even though he said that, freaking Nietzsche also did credit Rousseau as a figure with like great passion, authenticity. He had to, he felt that he had a kind of raw psychological honesty. Uh, and the one thing I think that really stuck out to Nietzsche that made him like him so much was Rousseau's willingness to challenge social conventions. You know what I mean? Especially the ones that were artificial, that were created, like government, the way freaking people should be governed, things of that nature. I think that's probably um,
Yeah. Again, we are talking about a time where the modern concept of national governments in a lot of Europe was being molded, were being molded, were being formed.
mhm. Well, I mean, I know Nietzsche was into like deep human emotions and stuff of that nature too. Like he wasn't just about like um, being rebellious and stuff. He was real big on that. And if you pay attention to what Rousseau wrote, first of all, he's French, you know, and these French people they have a way of writing things all pretty
Nietzsche?
and
Sorry, Nietzsche was German or
German.
was
And well, I mean, you know, a German listening to a French person write poetry, poetic words. So you know he fell in love with the poetic French style of writing. I could almost bet that, considering he's from Germany and stuff. But I could see that. Also, like the thing about Rousseau is like Rousseau also exposed the hypocrisies of civilization. You know what I'm saying? And he'd also, I mean, it was kind of like he was forcing Europeans to to freaking like discuss the tension between nature and society, basically. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things when it comes to society that freaking is just completely bogus. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? When
sort of.
you know, like, well, for one thing, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, you sit, you look at the Constitution here in the United States. You know, if you look at it for face value, you'd think, oh man, the Constitution is just the greatest thing in the world. You know what I mean? But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of things that actually took place that wasn't so cool. You know what I mean? And I've mentioned it before. But if you didn't do the research, you'd never know about it. You know, like the Constitutional Convention was actually done in secrecy so that the rest of the people here in the United States didn't know about it. You know, and there was a reason for that. It was because the majority of people who believed in the United States wouldn't have agreed with some of the stuff that was drawn up on the Constitution, you know, um, and that's the reason why George Mason and the Anti-Federalists walked out of the convention because they wanted the Bill of Rights. You know, there was nothing in there to protect people's private property. There was nothing that protected their right to bear arms, things of that nature. These were all left out of the Constitution, um, and they left vague mentions of what our rights were, which now everybody talks about. You know, like because it does. It talks. We've discussed it about sovereignty and God-given rights, but people who followed George Mason's camp wanted it in writing, you know, which is also another bad thing. It's just two different sides of the coin. and both of them are pretty bad. And like all I'm trying to say is, if you looked at the Constitution and you didn't research into all that stuff, you'd say, "Oh man, this is great stuff." You know what I mean? But you're not going to learn things like what I just said, or the fact that people who were poor couldn't vote until Andrew Jackson was president. You're not going to hear about that. You know,
Mm.
so even though even though it had its problems, what I always say is, like, the constitutional government is probably the best thing we've got going for us. It's not perfect, but it's better than some of the other alternatives. You know what I mean? I don't know if you'd agree with that or not.
I don't know. It depends on which alternatives you're talking about.
We're talking about socialism, communism. Um, what else we got? Monarchism. We could go back to the empirical rule with fiefdoms. What do you think? You think we should do that?
Um, could do. Again, socialism in its. Again, it depends on how far you want to push this. Socialism itself is not necessarily a bad idea, but again, if you're going to go into extreme socialism, so Nazism, communism, technocratism, can be a bad thing.
Well, the thing of it is it's, well, okay, like with Nietzsche, okay, when it comes to individualism, what Nietzsche saw Rousseau as was like a precursor to the idea of the individual in revolt, and that was an archetype that Nietzsche admired. Now, when you hear the individual in revolt, that's another code word for freaking um, that's kind of radicalism. You know what I mean? Now, radicalism in Europe wasn't the same as radicalism in the United States when it comes to Andrew Jackson, because he was a radical. But it seems like his form of radicalism was a lot softer than what it was in Europe. You know what I mean? Because I mean, here Andrew Jackson, if it wasn't for him, we would never have, as a poor person, we would have never been able to vote. It would have always been the rich man, and they set that up on purpose because they felt that by allowing poor people to vote, it would allow a rich man to influence votes through money. You know what I mean? Um,
Arguably, you've already got that in the US. You still got that in the US.
well,
Before, in the US, there is no spending caps on electioneering, unlike in majority of European countries. In the UK, yeah, there definitely is a spending cap. Also, isn't it just inevitable that you're going to have poor people that are not free men? They're the sort of richer upper class going to vote sooner or later, because again, you could make the same argument about people of color not being able to vote, or
that's actually
women not being able to vote.
that's actually true. You know what I mean? Because, like, I mean, like I said, the Constitution wasn't perfect, and, like, at first it was only the white United States American who was able to vote, rich white American, and then it became,
It was actually technically it wasn't white, and Americans was just people, landowners, so you could still be black
Rich,
and be a landowner.
rich landowners. Yeah, that's a better
Yeah,
way of
exactly.
saying
Yeah.
it. And then I believe black people were actually allowed to vote before the women, but the only thing that held them back was the Jim Crow laws. So, like, if you were a black man in the northern part of the country, you could vote. But if you were in the South, Jim Crow laws prevented you from voting.
Yeah,
Uh,
but in the southern part of the US, how many black people were landowners?
well, that's the thing, man. They did have.
So it's not necessarily a an issue of race or color. It's per se it's a issue of class. This is the issue I always find with the modern concept, especially in the US. It seems like the US seems to ignore the point of class and look at everything from a sort of race or color sort of point of view. Where in reality, I think the argument should really be focused upon classism.
Well, it's really odd when it comes to if black men with properties actually were able to vote in the South or not. Because, like,
Mm,
there were people who did own freaking property. There were actually black men who did have slaves. Okay. I
mm.
mean, the guy who invented peanut butter, George Washington Carver, I believe his name was. Um, he actually freaking owned slaves, and he was a black man. But did he vote? Don't know. I haven't been able to find out.
Did he have the ability to vote rather than did he vote? See,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. That's a good point. So and the reason why black people in the North were even able to vote in the first place was because of what we had discussed before about the Ivory Coast and England banning or abolishing slavery and making it illegal for anybody to export slaves out of Africa through the Ivory Coast.
Mm.
They were very influential when it came to the northern parts of the states. You know what I mean? So you had that going on, and then that's when the abolishment of slavery here in the United States started taking place. So you had that influence happening right there. Now, this actually um, has to do with like radicalism. So you know what I mean. That this this is a form of radicalism that was taking place here in the United States. But also you need to understand like radicalism was actually taking place over in Europe as well. You know what I mean? Um, and this was starting to take on a new form because you had romanticism and then you had realists, the realist movement and the romanticist movement, and radicalism, which culminated into these kind of things, these kind of factions, where you had two different worldviews that were colliding with one another. And they're both what would eventually become negative aspects of what we have now, believe it or not. You know what I'm saying? Um, so you had one aspect that followed Karl Marx, who was very, very methodical, very, very like when you hear Karl Marx, you think Marxism, you think communism, you think socialism, but people don't really understand what that's all about. That's actually about freaking the economy. That's about people freaking wearing the same clothes and doing the same stuff And like we were talking about in the last episode, um, you walked in line and you did what you were told to do. You didn't own your own house. Somebody gave you a house according to the size of your family. You know what I mean? Um, Everything was equally passed out according to the needs of the many and not the needs of the few. That's
Was held saying um, to each of the own.
to
Um,
each their own.
yeah, I can't remember the full quote.
Now, Nietzsche accused Rousseau of paving the way for what he saw as a democratic and leveling ideology that prized sameness over greatness. Okay, rather than greatness, um, Nietzsche felt Rousseau believed in sameness. You know what I mean? Like, because if you remember when we were talking about Rousseau felt that if it was egotism, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't dress like a beautiful woman in expensive clothes because that was all about the ego. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Everybody should dress like homely little girls on the farm. You know what I mean? They shouldn't put makeup on or wear beautiful dresses because that was just ego talk.
of course, yeah. Sorry, I just remembered the quote. Yeah, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs.
Hmm.
Mm,
Right.
mm,
Now, Nietzsche associated Rousseau's ideas with the French Revolution and with the moral language of equality and fraternity. All right. Now, I don't know. When it comes to fraternity, I don't know exactly how Nietzsche felt when it came to fraternity. Like, that's a touchy subject. I don't really know if he agreed with it or if he disagreed with it. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever
This
heard?
this goes back to the concept of the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Now I don't know what his idea when it comes to fraternity is. Now he may now now equality. I don't know about that either. Now, when you come to equality, that's a whole different area of freaking debate too. Like, it gets really crazy there. But I don't really know what Nietzsche would have thought about this. I, I I know that I know that what he did feel was that he felt that this French Revolution was was about values, and it celebrated the the masses at the expense of the exceptional individuals. You know what I mean? So
mm,
I know he felt that way. Um, Now, in this light, Rousseau appeared as a spiritual ancestor to like modern ideologies that Nietzsche loathed. You know, um, he felt that those weakened the instinct of power, excellence, and the noble distinction. Basically, like if you read Nietzsche, you'll hear his theories on the hero. You know what I mean? He was about the noble hero, and that is eventually what the Nazis manipulated into their beliefs and created their idea of like the perfect Aryan. You know what I mean? That was something he did believe in, this noble distinction, basically. You know what I mean? So,
mm,
and what Rousseau was. also saying Nietzsche loathed. So he had that conflict going on there. You know, he admitted that he was uh, very, very important to European thought, but at the same time, there were things that he loathed. You know, and Nietzsche never dismissed Rousseau entirely. He actually didn't. He respected Rousseau's uh, capacity to like provoke radical thinking and stuff, and he was real big on human nature and morality too. So at times Nietzsche suggested that Rousseau, despite his role in promoting what Nietzsche saw as democratic illusions, was nonetheless a deeply noble spirit who suffered from the contradictions of modernity. You see, I read that and I felt that was a load of shit. You know what I mean? Like you'd never hear frickin' Nietzsche saying something suffered from the contradictions of more modernity. You know what I mean? I think that's the one thing Nietzsche hated more than anything else is when people played the victim.
Mm.
He hated this whole victim mentality, which would take it back to the slave mentality kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
That's the one thing when I heard that or read that, I was like, no, that's not Nietzsche. Um, that's not Nietzsche at all. So
Mm.
like now, one thing I do think that frickin' Nietzsche did bring out when it came to Rousseau. Um, I believe that what he saw when he read of Rousseau's writings was that they were more or less like confessions of a man who was wrestling with like the collapse of traditional values of that time. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Because um, he knew that it was all coming to an end. Because it goes back to what we were talking about with religion and the Enlightenment and stuff of that nature. You know what I mean? Nietzsche was also the one, by the way, who wrote "God is Dead." You know what I mean?
Mm.
Which probably is the book that made him the most hated man in Europe. To be honest with you. And it's probably the most misinterpreted book as well because he wasn't literally saying God is dead. He was saying that because of technology and science and all of that stuff. And you also have to remember what was it? Survival of the fittest. What was that called again? I'm having a brain fart.
Darwinism.
Darwinism. Yes, that was probably the nail on the coffin. You know what I mean? And this was going on during the time of Nietzsche, and that was what he was discussing. You know what I mean? It was like a lot of the religious ideologies were just one at a time being just destroyed. You know, um, so whenever you freaking think of that book, you just remember that that was the kind of stuff that Nietzsche was talking about. He wasn't saying that God was literally dead. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, a change of a change of philosophy. No, not a change of philosophy, but a change of change of how people viewed their existence. A
now,
change of change of what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
that's fine. Now, if you really want to know a lot more about Nietzsche, first of all, Nietzsche rarely wrote lengthy, uh, focused criticisms on Rousseau, but throughout his works, especially in Beyond Good and Evil, also the Genealogy of Morals, and another one called Twilight of the Idols, he alluded to Rousseau. And that's in connection with the broader movement of European decline. Uh, and he felt that it was through the suppression of the will to power and again the celebration of weakness and virtue. Like he was really against celebrating weakness and virtue. I think that's one thing that Christianity, Christians actually had a problem with Nietzsche about too, because that's like one of their that's one of the things that they believe in the most. Actually, even the Jews, I believe, believed in that, didn't they?
Mm, good point. Yeah.
It was and Nietzsche was against all that stuff. So,
Mm.
but he also, at the same time, he believed that Rousseau emphasized on like the natural goodness of man. Um, but I personally think that contributed to the romanticism aspects. You know what I mean? Of the oppressed and the condemnation of strength and ambition and hierarchy. Like that's what I personally believe. I believe that when it comes to Nietzsche, that's what he saw. You know what I'm saying? Like
You say the natural goodness of man, but come from a Catholic sort of point of view, original sin. There is no such from the Catholic sort of viewpoint. There isn't a natural goodness because we are sinful from the beginning of life.
that's all of Christianity, to be fair. I mean, they believe that all of them do. Like man was born into sin. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not
Mm.
really just Catholics. It's all of Christianity believes that. you know, I remember.
And therefore, we need a guiding hand
Yeah,
to make us less sinful. May that be a church or may that be another power government.
right. Now, Nietzsche, and this is just, this is just my take on it, but I believe that that Nietzsche believed that freaking uh, this whole goodness of man, it contributed to like the romanticization of the oppressed and the condemnation of strength, ambition, and hierarchy. Whereas like the natural goodness of man, which is something that is definitely something that Christians don't believe in. Nietzsche also believed that it was a bad thing too, is what I think, and I think that's probably where a lot of that's probably where Nietzsche and religion kind of go hand in hand. They agreed with it. You know what I'm saying?
Is that true for all Christian subsets? Because again, I'm thinking Catholics. Yeah, but the Anglo.
I I don't really know, because like even when you go off to the sects, like you start checking out the Gnostics too. They believe that the entire body was sin. You know what I mean? It was dirty, and that to be free of sin, you have to be released from the physical body. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I don't ever. I believe that spiritually they believe that we were good, but on a physical level, no, I don't think they ever believed that. They believed that we were born into sin physically. I really, I mean, to be honest with you, um, it's really interesting when you look at that stuff. So, yeah,
Mm.
maybe you can find out some day or another. What do you think?
It's a complicated point.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, it really
Mm.
is. You know, so I mean, if you want to, at some point, we can come back to it.
Mm.
That's really the only important stuff when it comes to Nietzsche that I really wanted to bring up when it comes to him. Now, what I would like to do is to go back over the rise of realism in the 19th century because we kind of covered the basics, but um, I don't think we really hit it hard enough. You know what I'm saying? Because um, it's good to bring up the whole basic ideas behind romanticism and realism, but we also have to talk about realist thinkers and writers how they publicly criticize old traditions. You know what I mean? That they would point blank criticize old traditions, folklores, and long held beliefs, um, especially those that were rooted in religion, mythology, or like national legends. So I think that is something that we really should be talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
Not.
Um,
I mean,
I mean,
go ahead.
mm, is there such a thing as national legends within the concept of the US?
Well, yeah,
Probably not, because the US is not old enough to.
George Washington, dude. Do you remember the apple or the
Okay, okay, yeah, 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 yeah.
George Washington was so honest, dude. Listen to
I
this.
mean, I was thinking of the sort of George and the Dragon sort of concept in British mythology compared to the
It's
King
one,
Canute mythology. That's the point out last in one of our chats.
right, and
Mm.
it's one and the same. Believe it or not, you don't want to hear how honest George Washington was, do you? Because I noticed how you kind of like kept talking. You don't want to hear it.
No, I'm just thinking that um, because the sort of age of Britain, England,
Mhm.
Britain, we've had time to manifest um, these concepts. Whereas in the US, whereas in the Americas, you haven't.
Well, I mean, we have actually. It's just, see, you guys are you're so like saturated with realist ideas. You don't really even comprehend what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's really entrenched into your way of thinking. You know what I mean? Like first of all, realism. Okay, the thing you have to understand about realism is they back in those days, they publicly criticized old traditions, folklore, and long-held beliefs, as well as national legends. Okay, that's the
Mm.
first thing you have to understand. Um, and the reason for it was because they were concerned with truth. They also believed in material reality. human behavior. They were also um, big on economics and psychology. So those are the things that they played on. Okay, and many realists uh, believed that folklore and traditional beliefs were obstacles to progress. You know what I mean? Um, it was against it was an obstacle to progress, rational understanding, and the only thing that they really cared about was social reform. That was it. You know,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's kind of the way. If you're honest with yourself and you look at the way things are, especially in England, man, that's the way it is. It's cut and dry. You know what I mean? Social reform. That's what it's all about. When you hear about
Mm.
when you hear about that party you hate the most, the Labor Party, what's the one thing they're always talking about, dude? And why is it that they're always in power? It's because they're talking about that social reform, buddy. They're going to get in
Actually,
there.
they have always been in power. Um, in my lifetime, um, we've had three Labour governments. Actually, in my lifetime, only two. Yeah, three Labour governments. I was going to say four Labour governments, man. Probably. Actually, five. Yeah, four.
Mhm. Now, even though we are in the moment of talking about England and we also talked about the United States, we're supposed to talk about Europe. Okay, so um, I wanted to bring up Gustav Flaubert. Have you ever heard of him?
Again, rings a bell, but
You don't know him, do you?
it does ring a bell. But again, you are just pointing out a load of names and expect me to. I'm not a walking encyclopedia.
You should
Funny
be.
enough.
You should be. I mean, you know what? I've known you for freaking a while now, dude. You should be. This should, you know, you,
Uh,
this shit should be on the top of your head with all the other shit you put me through, dude. You should know this stuff. You should know that.
my grey matter is only of a certain capacity.
Have you heard of Emile Zola?
Possibly.
Okay. Let me. First of all, Gustav wrote with sarcasm a lot about provincial mind and mocked like sentimentalism in a lot
Mm.
of his works. Then Zola was an advocate of scientific naturalism, and he wrote like vast narratives about hereditary. He wrote heredity, alcoholism, industrial exploitation, political corruption, stuff like that. Now his novels treated human beings as a product of environment and biology rather than as like spiritual or mystical or mythical beings. And he had
Mm.
very little patience for mystical or folklore explanations when it came to human suffering. You know what I mean? So that's what these two were really about. After that, there's another name I want to ask you about. Now, you might know this because you are from England, and if you don't know this name, then you should be ashamed of yourself as an Englishman. As an Englishman with a teaching degree, nonetheless.
Degree. It's not really. Well, is it degree?
You have to. You said you were a substitute, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's technically a degree. It's a certification, but I'm not sure if it's a degree.
Okay, so you have certification. Okay.
Mm.
Do you know who Thomas Hardy was?
Okay, yeah, that name does ring a bell.
Okay, what do you think about Thomas Hardy?
Again, that name just rings a bell at this present moment. You should give me a list of these names beforehand, and then I can remind myself.
I did. It's just you didn't do your homework.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Well, I didn't give you the names of the A list. You know what I'm saying? These are the A list of the topic. I gave you an outline of the talking points, but I didn't.
You only
Yeah.
give me that.
Well, I wanted to hold off on Thomas Hardy to see if you could actually tell me something about him because this well, and I purposely left Charles Dickinson out, just so you know, and I did that for a reason because that's like the easy target. You know what I mean? When people start talking about realists, like let's just badmouth Charles Dickinson, which we can if you want to.
Dixon.
Charles Dickinson. Christmas Carol.
Yeah, that's not Dixon.
Dickinson. You are high on methamphetamine.
Sorry.
Charles Dickinson. which we can, but I mean,
Yeah.
but the thing that I wanted to point out about Thomas Harding is as a realist, okay,
Dickens, not Dickinson.
Dickens, Charles
Dickens,
Dickens, right? Okay, I see what you were going after.
Yeah. You confused me.
Okay, I don't even know why I said Dickinson when it's Dickens, but now Thomas Harden or Hardy, better get those names right, Hardy. Now the thing about him is like he portrayed a lot of rural communities where they were portrayed as like superstitious and
Oh, this is in the Livingston logo.
yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Now
yeah.
and he also wanted to like make it out to where like old customs like still shape these people's lives. You know what I'm saying? And that they were superstitious. Now he never really attacked like these traditions directly, but he also presented it like with some kind of tragic realism. You know what I'm saying? And this was supposed to show like how these beliefs could lead to like suffering or social failures and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Have you ever heard of a book called Tess of the Umbervilles or Herbervilles of the Herbervilles? Huh?
Are you sure you got that name correct?
Yes, Tess of the Herbervilles. The Herber. It's D exclamation point
Okay.
Urbervilles. Now, see, what he did here in this novel is he basically examined the ruin of a young woman who was caught.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from now. Carry on. Yeah.
She was caught between Victorian morality and social expectations. Okay. Now, what he was trying to do is make clear that inherited beliefs, or he was trying to make clear like the whole thing about inherited beliefs, purity, honor, and fate could be like oppressive or and unjust. So trying to trying to slut shame that poor little girl was just horrible, and it was unjust and oppressive to Thomas Hardy. So, what do you think about that, man? Think there's any? Huh?
Um, Sorry, my brain's a bit flat at the moment.
So that's basically realism. You know what I'm saying? Whenever people that are pushing this whole thing where it's unjust or it's oppressive for you to um, call somebody out because they're doing something that is impure or dishonorable. Um, you know what I mean? It causes oppression and being unjust and stuff like that. So, do you think that that's actually something that's become an issue today by any chance? Sound familiar?
what concept?
Well, I mean, slut shaming. Do you,
Okay,
what would happen in today's world if you actually went out and slut shamed somebody in
depends
public?
on what. Yeah, it depends. I was going to say depends on the individual
Huh?
and again depends on who the individual is and depends on what the people you're speaking to.
Okay, if it was a bunch of kids that was around you, they would probably throw freaking tomatoes at you and shun you until you disappeared from view because
Again, depends on the individual you're shaming.
now realism, okay, challenged the authority of the past and questioned whether old ways of thinking could truly address the problems of the present. That's what realism did. Okay. Now, in France, realism was particularly vocal in their rejection of romantic nationalism and Catholic tradition. In Russia, the realist movement included figures like Ivan Turgenev, Leo Tolstoy, and Fyodor Destov. Uh, what is it? I always Dostoevsky is it's. I always have a hard
Okay.
time. And Dostoevsky. Um, Now these guys, their big deal was they were always examining the tensions between modern scientific thought and old religious and aristocratic values. That was what they were big on. Now in Germany, philosophers like Ludwig Feuerbach and later Karl Marx criticized traditional religion, particularly Christianity, as a source of illusion and control. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Illusion. Very. I'm not sure if it's a Christian concept itself. I mean, I'm thinking of back in the Reformation, or back in, actually back in the concept of Henry VIII, where there was a separation between Catholic philosophy and Christian or Anglo Protestant philosophy, where the illusions
Start all over. You got
illusions of Christianity was the
Start.
illusion of Christianity was removed or mitigated.
Yeah, and I believe that's
Yeah.
as a result of realism, most likely. Like it,
Mm.
and I believe that's what Nietzsche was talking about when he was saying that God is dead, and then like the Romanticist movement, they believe that what the Enlightenment and realists were actually doing was they were making these um, beliefs and everything, just the world like a cold mechanical freaking function, basically. You know what I mean? Um, and that's that. When you say that, that's what I kind of think of. You know what I mean? Like they actually achieve that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you said before about England being more of a. It's more of a custom to go to church and be religious than what it is to actually be religious and go to church and believe in God and actually have, you know, have a true belief system. It's like a function. You know what I mean? We must go to church.
Mm.
Kind of thing. That's what really sticks out to me whenever you said that. So yeah, I think I just wanted to expand on that.
Mm.
Now, Feuerbach argued that theology was simply anthropology in disguise, that humans had projected their own nature onto a divine being and had lost themselves in the process. Marx, building on this idea, claimed that religion was the opiate of the masses, a tool used by ruling classes to maintain control over the poor. For Marx and many other realists, folklore, religious belief, and national myth were not innocent stories, but ideological weapons used to justify inequality and stifle change. You got any thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, I've got faults, Foreman, but they are Foreman.
You got what?
I've got faults, but they're sort of in formation.
You're trying to gather it in your head correctly before you say it.
Yeah. In effect.
I got you. Well, I mean, you heard Karl Marx. I already know freaking, there's parts of your brain just firing off right now, dude. You're like, the wheels are turning, dude. Okay, now, this critical attitude extended beyond religion into national identity and the romanticized histories of different people. Okay? Many realist historians began to abandon heroic narratives of kings, saints, and divine destiny, and instead wrote about the daily lives of workers, the development of laws, and the economic forces that shape society. Now, in doing so, they often undermined myths that were deeply cherished by nationalists or traditionalists. Okay. This shift in focus from the noble and the sacred to the common and the secular was one of the most defining features of the realistic age. So whenever, like you see, we'll do a little bit of art and everything. So like when you see paintings that portray, the poor worker sitting out in the field picking a freaking watermelon or fruit or vegetable, or the farm where it shows the farmer, doing farm work or something like that in paintings. That's what that is. That's the realist interpretation of art. You know what I mean? Instead of focusing on these other things, they're focusing on um, they're focusing on the working man. And, you know what I mean? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Mm.
That's basically what they did. So you still trying to articulate. Now, I understand
Uh,
that was the defining feature when it comes to the realist age. Okay. Now, during the 19th century, there was significant tension between realists and believers in pan Slavic folklore. Okay. Now, particularly in Eastern Europe and Russia. Now, this is where we start going from what we've been talking about that you really don't know much about, which I kind of understood you wouldn't, because most people don't really do that much research into like the whole thing between romanticism and realist, and they don't connect the dot there, or the dots there. You know what I'm saying? But it did play a significant role because it spills over to the Pan Slavic folklores, and that is really what created a lot of the issues that we had during the 20th century up until now. You know what I mean? So during the 19th century, like I said, there were a lot of tension between the realists and the Pan-Slavic folklore. Um, Now, this wasn't just literary disagreements. This had to do with deeper cultural and political conflicts, um, and it had to do with national identity, historical memory, the role of myth when it comes to like shaping society. Um, Now, the rise of realism challenged a lot of the foundational ideas that Pan Slavists and other romantic nationalists held dear. You know what I mean? Um, their idolization of like a shared Slavic past, which was really rooted in legend. Um, it also had a lot to do with rural purity and also Orthodox mysticism. You know, there was a lot of that was going on when it came to Pan Slavism, and realists were really speaking out against it and criticizing it, which caused a lot of tension between the Pan Slav and the realists during that time. Now, Pan Slavism as a movement, it emerged in response to pressures of westernization. Also, it had to do with modernization. Um, they also had an issue when it come to foreign domination, especially um, in regions that were under rule of the Austrian, Hungarian, and the Ottoman empires. Those two areas sound familiar to you?
of course.
You know, this is what played the key part in what we would eventually call World War One and World War Two. Okay,
Oh,
this is
mainly World War One.
what we refer to. I'm not now. Later on, I can go through that because I have an issue with the terminology World War. Okay, like that's a load of shit. It's just you know how you always talking about commercialize or commercialism and branding.
Mm-hmm.
That's what World War was. That's a load of shit. Okay,
Well, it was still a war that affected the entire world. Oh. majority of.
Well, they go off of the idea that all of these countries were allied with either the Allies or the Axis. Okay.
Mm.
But when you go historically and look back, you'll find out that there were just as many wars before these wars
Mm.
that had just as many allied countries involved as World War One and World War Two. You see what I mean? But they portrayed these two wars as being the most horrific wars of all time, dude. You know, when in
Yeah.
fact there were a few of them just before that. You know.
Based on the number of casualties.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how you measure it.
Yeah. Well, we can. I'll tell you what. We can get into that one in the next episode and discuss that because it is actually an interesting topic, and I can actually start that out when we start getting into the more modern conversation about this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because I believe that is something people need to be aware of. This goes all the way back to the Spanish succession.
Yeah, I was just thinking you could argue that the Napoleonic War was a world war. You could argue that the Spanish,
I
British conflict, well, Spanish, Portuguese, British conflict war, it was a world war.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I accidentally got right. I had to hit refresh, get back to it because Rumble
Hmm.
decided that we were like doing too much talking, and they needed me to go. They said, "You're out of here, buddy." You can hear me, right?
Yeah, you just sort of was muffled for just a couple seconds.
Okay, good. Now, the thing um, about the pan Slavism is it was both a cultural and a political ideology, and its aims was to unite all Slavic people based on shared language, heritage, and spirituality. Okay, this is where you start. Well, first of all, you got to remember this shared language, heritage, and spirituality, because this later evolves into something that we'll be discussing again later on, especially when it comes to shared language. I wanna talk about the blocks that were put on Germany just before World War II, and this is very very important when it comes to shared language. Okay, um, its champions often turn to folklore, mythology, and ancient customs to recover a sense of unity and authenticity. They collected peasant songs, heroic epics, and tales of ancient warriors, and framed these stories as living links to a glorious and broken national tradition. So that uh, that is what they basically did. Now, this emphasis on folklore wasn't just nostalgic. Okay, for many Pan-Slavics, it was the emotional and moral foundation of political nationalism. Folklore was seen as a true voice of the people, uncorrupted by foreign influence or intellectual elitism. It stood in contrast to the institutions of empire, capitalism, Western liberalism, which were all viewed as alien to the Slavic identity. So, in this worldview, myth and tradition were not distractions from reality, but expressions of a deeper historical truth. Okay. You got anything you want to say so far?
Again, I've got a lot of things, but nothing I can put into words as such for this present moment.
So the peasant, the hero, and the mystic became central figures in a vision of national rebirth for these people. Okay, realists found this approach problematic. They rejected the romantic glorification of the past and questioned the authenticity of the so-called national soul preserved in folklore. Many realists saw these stories not as expression of deep truth, but as simplistic fantasies that concealed the harsh realities of rural life, political oppression, and economic inequality. They accused Pan-Slavic romantics of indulging in myths while ignoring the suffering of real people. Now, realism sought to expose poverty, corruption, social stratification, and the often brutal dynamics of power that shaped everyday life. This conflict came to a head in the literary and intellectual scenes of Russia, Poland, and other Slavic nations. Okay, so this is where writers, Russian writers like Ivan Turgenev and Leo Tolstoy come into play, where they portrayed the rural peasantry not as like noble saviors of the national spirit, but as human beings who were struggling under ignorance or exploitation and stagnation and stuff of that nature. Uh, Now, their work actually stood in stark contrast to the romantic nationalism of of what they called Slavophiles, um, who idolized the Orthodox peasant as like the embodiment of Russian virtue. Okay, so you've got that going on too, like the Orthodox peasant. They pictured him as like the embodiment of Russian virtue. So a poor peasant girl working on the farm was like Russian virtue. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And they wanted to show a contrast where they were ignorant people who were being oppressed, subjugated, basically. So, in Slavic Central Europe, similar tensions did play out. In places like Bohemia, Slovakia, and Serbia, Pan-Slavic intellectuals worked to preserve national epics and reconstruct mythological histories, often with the goal of political unification or independence. But meanwhile, realist writers and thinkers uh, called for attention to like contemporary social issues, urban poverty, and the need for secular education and reform. Now, these conflicting approaches created a persistent divide between those who looked backwards for inspiration and those who insisted on confronting the realities of the present. Um, at times, this conflict became political. Governments that aligned with Pan-Slavic ideas used folklore and religious traditions to reinforce national unity and suppress dissent. Now, this is where you come into Rousseau. Okay, we go back and we look at the way Rousseau was and how he believed about how he believed about the peasant life and living in a smaller town and things of that nature. And then that other guy, I hate saying his name, the one with the French Revolution and his thoughts on dissent. Okay,
Mm.
dissent was not tolerated. Okay, so they used this to suppress dissent. And this is what I'm talking about. This is like the culmination of what we eventually would call socialism. You know what I mean? It's a mix of both romanticism as well as realism. Um, this has been pretty interesting for me from the time whenever I first started doing research on this until now. You know what I mean? Because I've actually started learning a lot about it, and like it's not just about radicals. It's not just about um, romanticism or realism. It's kind of like a culmination of all of it into one. Uh, what would you call that? An amalgamation
Mm,
of
I was
this.
going to say philosophy, but it's multiple philosophies, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah, like
oh yeah, a overarching philosophy.
yeah. Now, now realists who criticize these narratives or oppose or exposed uncomfortable truths about national life. They were sometimes censored, they were exiled, or publicly condemned. In Russia, the Tsarist regime alternated between promoting romantic nationalism and repressing writers who depicted social decay or questioned state ideologies. This tension reached its peak in the later 19th century as revolutionary movements began to adopt realist critiques of power, while Pan-Slavics clung to cultural revival through myth and memory. Um, so this is where all of the culmination of revolution in Russia was taking place. You know what I mean? And it's like when you hear about the reds and the whites, you know, that's what that was all about. You know what I mean? You had the romanticists who believed, or the Pan-Slavics who believed in the past, you know, for inspiration. Where with the other ones, you had people believing that they needed to um, believe in be a realist basically, and worry about taking care of modern problems. You know what I mean? But it was all socialist beliefs, you know,
Mm.
which I find pretty interesting. So since you sat there pretty much the whole episode and didn't say nothing, dude, you need to say something because that's just disgusting, man.
That's not true. I have contributed.
A little bit.
Again, you are talking about such a wide-ranging, complicated.
Well, you can't blame it on the coffee no more, dude. Seriously, like it's been almost
Uh,
30 seconds. It'll be 3 hours that we started this.
okay.
So you're gonna have to say something, man, because I know you actually had thoughts during the whole time that I was doing.
I had, but at this present moment, my brain's a bit.
It hurt your brain to think, didn't it?
At this present moment.
But yeah, when this is some of the crazy stuff. Like, you know how when people talk about like how hard it is for them to understand what actually took place during World War I and World War II because of like the way history is portrayed. I think that it's hard for people to understand because like a lot of this information that I just did right here is information that's not being taught to people. You know what I mean? Because like I remember even when I was younger, I would think about like a lot of that stuff, and it just did not make sense to me. And even later on in my 30s and 40s, when I started getting interested more in that time period, it was like, man, this stuff just does not make sense. And then when I finally buckled down and I actually did a deep dive into this stuff, it took me all the way back, you know.
This
Um,
is verging on the more esoteric concepts rather than the idea of fighting for one's nation, fighting for one's beliefs. Yeah, you took a more esoterical.
Esoteric.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go as much esoteric as what I would as the intellectual aspects. Like these were the intellectuals that were
Hmm.
debating over these ideas, and they were like molding the way people thought. You know what I mean? And people just follow blindly, and they don't really pay attention to what they're actually doing or what they're saying. They just do what they're told, and they believe what they hear. You know what I mean? They don't really think for themselves. I haven't found too many people in real life who actually thinks for themselves. You know what I mean? It's like earlier when I was talking about church, you know what I mean? I could not imagine a world without church because there are people who need church. If they
Hmm.
weren't in church having a preacher tell them this is right and this is wrong, they would be out on the streets murdering people. You know what I mean? They literally need that support for somebody to say, look, this is right, this is wrong. You do this, good things happen. You do this, bad things happen. You know what I mean? And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Just on a personal note, just being curious here. You've got a sort of Christian sort of upbringing for Christian philosophy, but you go to church. Do you go to church yourself on a
I
regular basis?
I was raised on more of a Gnostic or
Uh, hmm.
agnostic belief
Yeah, same
system.
here.
Now,
My 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 school life was more Christian CFA, but or in a personal viewpoint, yeah, I am, I was more of an agnostic.
now with me, I have to bow down and say yes, I do have some realist points of view when it comes to religion. Okay, I don't support the actual Christian belief. I don't really support any kind of religious belief like Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism. I believe that there is something greater than me because I don't have all the power in the world. You know what I mean? I can't go out and I can't freaking make a tree grow straight. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't have that power. I don't even have the power to convince another person to think the way I think they should think. And even if they did think the way I should think, they would still mess it up and do something that I didn't agree with. So I don't have that power either. You know what I mean? Um,
Been on Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, everybody thinks exactly the same.
you know. Now, when it comes to God, there is a God, but I'm not Him. You know what I mean? That's basically the attitude I take. If there
Okay.
is a God, it's not me, and that's a form of humility. And you'll find that like these religious principles actually apply to everybody. If you know what I mean. I agree with spiritual principles. Religious principles are part of that. I do agree with them, but I don't agree with the actual religions. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't believe that a God who is supposed to be loving, caring, and forgiving would say, go out and murder people in my name. You know what I mean? I think that would be something that man would create in their their interpretation. They would say, well, we need these people to die, so we're going to say God said do it, and guess what? After you do it, you come back here, we'll give you a couple Hail Marys, and you'll be forgiven for murder. Thou shalt not kill. They didn't say thou shalt not murder. It's okay to murder, it's just not okay to kill. See? So now we got semantics going on there.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. You know what I mean? I personally don't agree with the idea of religions, organized religions. I don't agree with them. That's my stand on it. Now, that the other night on Jaffe's show, that one guy from Canada who's a psychologist, he mentioned people who were atheists have a tendency of having mental illnesses. Okay. Now you would think that I would disagree with that and think that that was horrible to say, but from the research I've done, I can honestly tell you that he is right about that, and I'll bring good examples up. I'll bring a good example up. Darwin. We were just talking about him, right? Darwin wanted so much to have the approval of his colleagues who were religious scientists during his time period. But when he presented it to them, they gave him really, really a harsh critique of his findings because they knew what it meant, okay? Now, even though they did that, he still kept quiet about it, all right? He didn't say nothing. And he actually suffered a lot of mental illness as well as physical illnesses because he denounced religion. And the thing that set him off to where he denounced religion was when his daughter died. Okay, after being criticized by his colleagues, his daughter died, and that's when he just went completely against religion altogether. That caused a lot of problems with him. A lot of people don't know that he suffered from mental illness throughout his life. You know what I'm saying? And my take on that is that the reason for that was like for me personally, when I came to my beliefs and the way I believe, I had a really hard time with accepting being an atheist. That's why I don't call myself an atheist. It is because I first of all, what they imply means that when you die, there's nothing. You're gone. It's over. You know what I mean? That's it. That's a pretty dark place to go to. In my opinion, that's worse than good versus evil. You know what I mean? Like you're dead. It's over. That's it. Put you in the ground. Nothing else. And I think for a person who has been raised and molded into believing the Christian belief or the Buddhist belief or whatever belief it is, when you have that just embedded into your brain and then you go against it, it creates a psychological issue. You know what I mean?
But also on the other point of that viewpoint, having too much of a religious underpinning can cause psychological issues.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. Religious people are crazy.
Some can be, that's to say.
I haven't found too many religious people that aren't crazy in some way. In some way or another. You know what I mean? And that's okay too, because it goes back to what I was saying. I could not imagine a world without churches, because people with mental illnesses rely on churches too. You know what I mean? They go there because they have serious problems and they need help. So I have no problem with Christians being mentally ill and crazy. Just don't make me mentally ill and crazy as any more than what I already am, you know. That's just my take on it. But
Yeah.
so yeah, did that did that freaking answer your question, dude? I think that took about like what
Sort
20
of.
minutes.
Sort of. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not saying there is a God. I'm not saying there isn't a God, but I'm safe about it. I learned that from AA. I was like, when I die, do I really want to be wrong? You,
Yeah. Either way. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And people say, oh, that's a horrible way of thinking. I'm thinking, nah, dude, that's actually the smartest way of thinking. And if you don't think that way, then you got problems, dude.
But if the atheists are correct, then when you die, who cares? You're not going to know anything about it.
Exactly. You see what I'm saying, dude? See the
Yeah.
perfection in that theory? But what if the Christians are right, dude? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You see? So don't mess up. Don't sit
You
there and call.
say the Orthodox Catholics are right, and you're going to, I don't know, find that you're going to have a fork shoved up somewhere in a fiery pit at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've learned to respect people because of their opinions and their views when it comes to religion. What to an extent. Like
Hmm.
I'm not gonna like get too carried away with it. Sometimes I do go off on some of the religious stuff, but that's because I know how to discern things. You know what I mean? When
Hmm.
because you'll hear people who are religious that like to spout off a lot of hateful stuff just so they can like push their narrative. I'll leave it at that. You know what I mean? But when they do that, it makes me upset because
Hmm.
freaking, you know, a lot of the stuff that people are pushing just isn't right. You know what I mean? They're talking about people who, I mean, they're talking about people like Jesus or Buddha. You know what I mean? Don't be pushing hate using spiritual people who are spiritual who are supposed to be doing good for freaking humanity supposedly. You know what I mean? I'm not even saying if that's real or not, but that's what their purpose was supposed to be for. You know what I mean? Don't be trying to spread hate in the name of something that's supposed to be good. I just don't
Are
agree.
you saying some people's viewpoints are doing good?
Some people use Christianity to push hate. Some
Hmm.
people use Buddhism to push hate. Some people use Hinduism to push hate. So that's where discernment comes into play. You have to learn how to discern what's real and what's not real. When you don't do that, you're going to fall for anything, and you're just going to fall in line, and you're not you're not going to you're not going to catch it until it's too late. You know, all of a sudden you're just doing horrible things that your conscience can't live with, and life becomes unbearable. And that has to do with the fact that you weren't able to discern the true from the false.
Hmm.
And educating yourself and learning all this cool stuff that only the hip kids who hang out in history class know about is the way of doing it. You know, if it's boring to you, you know what that means? That means freaking you're a boring person. You know what I mean? That's all it means. I can take anything and become excited with it
Okay.
as long as I stay focused and I freaking learn. Learning is the most important thing in the face of this planet. And if you're not learning, then you're stagnant. Okay, that's what I really believe.
Okay.
There's no such thing as sitting still. You either move forward or you freaking go backwards. There's no sitting still. So you either have to move forward or you have to fall back. You start going backwards, and that's when things get bad. You know, that's the best knowledge I can give anybody. That's all I know. And no, I'm not gay. Just, I know. I'm saying all that shit, and I'm like, dude, freaking, you sound like you're gay as freaking a $3 bill. Like shit. Okay. I'm supposed to be mature during the show too, so I need to be very careful. Like I'm talking about serious intellectual stuff, and I start talking weird. I apologize to anybody listening. So, any final thoughts before we get off here? Because
we're talking about very sort of complicated and in a lot of cases hysterical sort of concepts. I think I'll leave it like that, really, to be fair.
Well, has anything that we discussed today kind of rung a bell on some of the things that you've seen
several
going on?
things. Yeah, several things.
Okay, that's what's important, okay? Just realize that a lot of the stuff that everybody's saying is new and happening isn't really new and happening. It's, I mean, it's kind of like the same old story told by a different person. You know what I mean? Just as long as things kind of rung a bell, then that's all I care about, because it's like I said, people today need to hear this stuff. They really do. And if anything rings out where it sounds familiar about the things going on in your life, then check it out and learn about it, because this is stuff that you need to know and you need to hear. That I really get annoyed with people who say, "Frickin', we need to just forget about the past and worry about the future." And then there's also the people who think frickin' NASA is a horrible thing. We shouldn't be exploring space. We should get into the internet and create cryptocurrency and work on this and work on that and have little bitty phones and shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's more important than exploration. You know what I mean? When we stop exploring, we're dead. That's it. Nothing else. You know what I mean? I mean, humanity has always looked for the next thing. You know what I mean? We've always explored. That's what we are. That's who we are. When we stop doing that, that's when we're dead. It's over. That's just my opinion. But I think it's a good one. So is that good? You think I ended it on a good saying where it's not all belligerent and crazy like I do on my other shows?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to say thanks to everybody who watched. Thank you, Mark, for being here. This is being streamed on Rumble, Twitch, Kick, YouTube. We aren't streaming on X anymore because I walked away from the X Pro subscription. It was doing nothing for us. And we are on DLive, but we're not on DLive today because it created issues. But usually I am streaming on there. If you like this stream, or if you like this, please like, subscribe, share, make comments down in the comment section as well as in the chat section. We do appreciate comments, so leave us a comment, say hi, and with that, I am going to say bye. You want to say bye, Mark?
Bye, Mark. So end as it started.
All right. And I will see you guys later. You have a good night.